For centuries, the British monarchy has weathered wars, scandals, political upheaval, and the relentless scrutiny of the global press. But even within that long history, there are moments that send shockwaves through the institution itself. Moments when a single headline threatens to overshadow decades of carefully maintained tradition and stability. Today's story is one of those moments. A dramatic claim circulating across social media and commentary platforms suggests that Prince Andrew, the controversial younger brother of King Charles III, was arrested on his 66th birthday.
Breaking right now, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the brother of the king, the uncle of the future king, has been arrested for misconduct in public office at the King's Sandringham estate in the past 2 hours. The British royal family is now plunged into its biggest crisis since the abdication, with very real fears that King Charles may have to give up the throne and pass the shepherdship of the British royal family to his son, Prince William. This is an extraordinary, unprecedented, and historic development. And remember, this is just the start. One of 7 police inquiries into Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, including other forces looking into allegations of sex trafficking. So we are rolling on this dramatic breaking development for the British royal family. My superstar panel with me, our royal mastermind, Angela Levin, the historian and constitutional expert, senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, Rafe Hadel-Manku, and joining us stateside, royal YouTube sensation P. Diner. Rafe, what does this mean? What does this mean? Are we now in a situation that could see the king have to stand down if his brother is charged with a crime and fights the allegations in court? Remembering, Charles is accused of paying £1.5 million as part of the hush money settlement to the accuser, Virginia Giuffre.
Historians try very much not to predict the future. We can't predict that. And of course, as we know, a week is a long time in politics. Anything can happen. As things stand now, I think the king's position remains secure. But let's be clear, this really is unprecedented. We are in uncharted waters. Never in modern British history have we seen a senior member of the royal family arrested, specifically arrested for these sorts of charges, but arrested in general. There have been criminal convictions before, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, for having dogs dangerously unleashed, driving offences, but nothing on this scale. This goes right to the heart of the monarchy. There are questions that the monarchy now needs to answer. The monarchy is not used to being held to account, but they are now in a position where the never complain, never explain mantra, which for so long guided royal officialdom, can no longer stand. We now have a case where a prince of the blood will be under police custody on his 66th birthday, spending that in police custody, charged with misconduct in public office, which is a common law offence that carries potentially a lifetime imprisonment punishment. They're also reviewing, we understand, Thames Valley Police, the police force that arrived at Sandringham earlier on today. A number of them arrived. Having executed the arrest warrant, they then have, of course, the ability and the power to actually search Wood Farm, the property in which Andrew is currently housed. And they will have the potential to hold him for up to 96 hours. That's potentially 4 days. Although it's customary that in these cases you're usually held for around a day or so before being released on bail. We also understand that the police are potentially considering whether to lay charges under the Official Secrets Act for breaching that, in relation, of course, to the fact that we have allegations that Prince Andrew or Andrew Mountbatten Windsor had forwarded to Jeffrey Epstein confidential government reports, specifically relating to his trade envoy visits to Singapore, China, and Vietnam. There's also the potential for him to be charged under the National Security Act, a more recent act which supplants parts of the Official Secrets Act, and that as well carries with it the potential for life imprisonment. So these are dark days for the monarchy, and definitely the darkest days of all for Prince Andrew, for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, a man who probably assumed that by going into Wood Farm, he would disappear from public gaze and live out the rest of his years in obscurity. Well, he's in hotter water now than he ever has been.
Angela Levin, can you believe this? And how will Andrew be coping? His 66th birthday, right now, we believe he is either going through the process of checking in to a local police station or potentially sitting in a cell which has one toilet and one sink. This is a man who was so entitled, I think he believed he was above the law.
Yes, he has always been above the law, hasn't he? I think it's devastating, and as it hasn't happened ever really, such an important thing that it just makes you breathless, really. I think that I wonder that the king was told before they arrived in their taxis and cars, because I think that would have been courtesy and he wouldn't have said anything. Or maybe he said when he had to talk to them the other day that he did feel that something, he wanted to do the best and help the police in any way that they could. So I think maybe there was something there, but for him, it's very dangerous, isn't it? I mean, anyone who doesn't like the royal family and hasn't liked the royal family will do absolutely everything they can manage to get the whole lot out. Never mind anybody else. Let's cut it out. The whole thing stinks, and let's try and get someone else who would be more responsible. For me, that is a nightmare. But I think it is possible that they just go on and on about it now to prove that they're actually not worth anything. It's going to be very difficult. Then another thing is, on the other hand, is that if King Charles feels that this will make him very ill, which I'm not surprised if it does, and that perhaps he will pass it down to his son. And I think that that might be some way of helping him out of that terrible attack of, go out, go away, all that, which I think in any case he doesn't deserve. And actually speak to the air and say, look, I didn't mean to do this now, but you actually always had the view that you didn't want to do anything with Edward and so on, and put him there in his place. It's a dreadful, dreadful story. But what I am pleased about is that when I heard that so many documents were going back about very important things that had happened in the last few years, that it's taken out to China and all sorts of countries without us having any idea, and actually showing how he absolutely loads the royal family. He wants to take his own back.
P. Dina, this is obviously a dramatic escalation. You're in the US where the Epstein files have been released. This is going to be seismic news there too. Of course, coming just 24 hours after Virginia Giuffre's lawyer, David Boies, called on Andrew to be allowed to testify to the US Congress with clemency. That's not going to happen now. He's not saying a word, P. Dina, because Andrew's priority now has to be in some way avoiding jail.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk over here in the States about what is actually happening over in England. Surprisingly, not much outside of what we've heard on the news recently has been talked about with other people that were in these files. I think the majority of the people here in the States are just looking to see what is happening abroad, because with the Trump administration, there's a lot of silence around people in the States being brought into this. So they're looking to those abroad, and that is what's happening. And I think this information about Andrew is really going, and actually has already here in the States. I mean, it's the news is just going crazy over all of this because this has never happened before. And I think for the from the perspective of somebody who is so high up in England to happen, that I think changes the perspective of those here in the States. I think it's going to shift here in America because there are a lot of high profile people who were in those documents, but also then you have to understand that he was not arrested on what we would have thought he would have been arrested on, right? It was on this tax the information around the him being
Exactly,
with
the
the
misconduct in public office. And that's what's so
exactly.
fascinating, Rafe, isn't it? This is potentially just the beginning for Andrew in terms of his criminal troubles. The reason the police may have moved faster on this is because the emails are there. They are there in the Epstein files. We know that Andrew was forwarding highly sensitive government documents about Ukraine and about deals in Asia directly to Epstein if those emails released by the US DOJ are indeed legit. And no one is questioning the legitimacy of those documents. But this could be the first of many arrests, Rafe, because there are now multiple investigations going on, some of them sparked by the former British Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, about this Lolita Express, which flew into Stansted Airport in the United Kingdom, potentially sex trafficking women who were then taken to royal palaces. So this could just be the beginning. This could just be the first arrest, because maybe it's the easier arrest to make. In some ways, Rafe, the more serious charge, of course. I mean, misconduct in public office has sentencing guidelines of up to life in prison.
That's right. And this is all down, of course, to the release of the Epstein files. Had the Epstein files not been released, we wouldn't have seen all of this. And of course, as I said earlier, Andrew fully expected now he would be riding off into the sunset, living in exile, an obscure figure fading away from public memory. Instead, he is now in a situation that he couldn't even have imagined a year or two ago. Also, it's easier, of course, to deal with these sorts of matters, public misconduct issues, rather than dealing with sexual issues. We know that that's always been an issue with the law. But now that Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister of Britain, has called for an investigation there, as you say, around the fact that there were 90 flights by Jeffrey Epstein into the UK, allegedly for sex trafficking. 15 of those flights took place after he was released from prison as a convict. So there are questions around that. There are questions as to why the police hadn't actually acted on this earlier. And it's only now that Gordon Brown and the Epstein files have been released that they have decided to take a second look at all of this. But they could have reached out to the Department of Justice in America earlier to inquire what information there was about all of this. Was Andrew being treated differently? Do we see two-tier justice in the past, not treating Andrew as you would have treated a normal private citizen? Well, now he is a private citizen. We've even seen, of course, King Charles when he said in that unprecedented statement that, of course, the palace would work with police. He referred to his brother as Mr. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Hitherto, he'd only been Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Using that prefix of Mr. was the king's way of saying he is a private citizen. He should be treated without fear or favour. And now we're seeing that happen, and we understand also that British police are now asking the Department of Justice for the unredacted files so they can have full information about exactly what was going on as part of this broader investigation. There are, of course, allegations by another woman that she was sex trafficked. There are allegations also of another incident with another woman, which another police force are looking into. So this is and so many investigations are there, 7, as you say, that the police chiefs of Britain have now joined forces. So this is a coordinated, multiple investigation, and they're coordinating their resources in investigation to ensure that things can be done as smoothly as possible. Whether he does get charged under the Official Secrets Act or the National Security Act is all about whether being trade envoy makes him a public servant. He's not a civil servant, so there's a question as to whether his role as trade envoy applies to the Official Secrets Act. It probably does. And the fact that he released this confidential information to Epstein does mean it's probably likely that he would face a charge under that. We'll have to see what happens. But he should be very, very worried given how strict the sanctions are under the common law for public misconduct and under the National Security Act.
If you're just joining us, a reminder of what a historic day this now is. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor becoming the most senior member of the royal family to potentially face justice in well over a generation. He has been arrested on his 66th birthday at Wood Farm, a Sandringham property owned by King Charles that was until recently the home of the late Prince Philip. Andrew currently in custody. Police guidelines are that he could be held for 12 to 14 hours. These were the scenes of local police turning up en masse at around 9:30 a.m. this morning for this dramatic raid, which now puts Charles's reign under serious threat. And of course, we are asking in our live chat today whether King Charles should abdicate. A fascinating result so far. 79% of you saying yes, 21% of you saying no. Do keep your live chats coming in as well on the super chat. CL31181, thank you, says, was this an order from the firm for Andrew's head? Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't believe so, because you have to think of the position that this potentially constitutionally puts King Charles in. If we think back to that trial of Paul Burrell, do you remember that? When he was on the stand and was going to invoke a private conversation that he had with the late Queen Elizabeth II, the monarch at the time had to come forward and say, no, I don't want this case to proceed, because the conversation did take place. Now, if Andrew were to be charged and were to plead guilty and were to go on the stand and say, I had conversations with my brother about this. My brother was aware of my role. My brother was aware of my relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. My brother was aware of the money that was being paid to Virginia Giuffre. Then all of a sudden, the king's role constitutionally becomes very difficult indeed. So we are in uncharted times. This news has just broken. I want to show you how the UK mainstream media announced this news just an hour ago. Watch this.
The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation and development on this story.
Breaking news to bring you now. Thames Valley Police say that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office.
We start with breaking news about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The BBC understands that he has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public.
Just a dramatic moment, Angela Levin. As someone who has covered the British royal family for decades, did you ever expect it to end in this way?
No. No, absolutely not. I'm a great fan of the royal family, and I never thought that it could happen like this. I mean, Andrew has always been a very difficult man. I mean, one of the things that just turned my stomach when I read about it was that when his mother, the late Queen, was away, he was to take the girls up into the Buckingham Palace and have a nice time there. I mean, they used to be called, Mrs. Windsor is here, please let her in, and be polite, something like that, Mrs. Windsor, so that the aides just would do what they were told. But for me, to take a woman into the palace where his mother was, he was supposed to like her, but you see very, very clearly that he was just someone who would get out of her what he wanted. She spoilt him, and he just took advantage of it. But to do that, I think that makes me feel sick about the whole thing of the royal family, frankly.
Now, what is interesting is we are just learning, Rafe, look at this, that the Norfolk police are supporting the Thames Valley Police investigation. Ray, for people who don't understand how British policing works, while there is a national crime agency, police forces tend to take charge geographically, don't they, depending on where a crime has been committed. So what happens in this case when the crime has been committed over email decades ago? Who will take charge of that investigation?
Yeah, well, you're quite right. I suppose it depends upon if it's where the person was physically located at the time. It may be where the position where they were arrested. If the emails are deemed not to be geographically relevant, then it would be where the person is currently situated. So the reason that Norfolk police are involved is because Sandringham is in the county of Norfolk. The reason why Thames Valley Police are involved is because, of course, Windsor is within that region. And if anything relates to, for example, taking sex trafficked girls into Buckingham Palace, of course, there's an allegation that having been trafficked into Royal Lodge, a girl was later taken on a tour and given tea in Buckingham Palace. That would fall under the purview of the Metropolitan Police. And as I say, because there are 7 different inquiries going on, all of these different police forces have decided to coordinate and work together to ensure actually that there are no loopholes, that everything is airtight and watertight, and they can consult with each other on just these sorts of very issues.
Rafe, this puts the Prime Minister, and indeed all British politicians, in an unenviable position, because you well know in your role as a royal historian that for decades, Rafe, politicians have hidden behind the fact that really they don't talk about the royal family. That is one of the functions of the way that we work constitutionally. But the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, threw that out the window the other day when he said, no, you can absolutely speak about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He's not a member of the royal family, despite remaining 8th in line to the throne. I want to show you what our Prime Minister, I call him Slippery Starmer, had to say about Prince Andrew. This was in the hours before his arrest in an interview with the British Bashing Corporation and the presenter Naga Munchetty. Watch this, Rafe.
Straight. Should Andrew Mountbatten Windsor testify?
Yes. Anybody who has any information should testify. So whether it's Andrew or anybody else, anybody who's got relevant information should come forward to whatever the relevant body is. In this particular case, we're talking about Epstein, but there are plenty of other cases. It is anybody who's got information relating to any aspect of violence against women and girls has, in my view, a duty to come forward, whoever they are.
Former Prime Minister Gordon Brown has called on police to interview Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. You've said he should testify to Congress. Should he voluntarily come forward to UK police?
Well, I think that's a matter for the police. They will conduct their own investigations. But one of the core principles in our system is that everybody is equal under the law and nobody is above the law. And it is really important that that is applied across the board.
Last year there were calls, you'll be aware, for a debate in Parliament about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and his association with Jeffrey Epstein. Do you now think this should happen?
I think there is a debate going on in and around Parliament, and there'll be no prohibition on that so far as I'm concerned. I think His Majesty the King took strong action actually in relation to this when he stripped him of his titles, but certainly it concerns parliamentarians, but I wouldn't stand in the way of it. I think it's important that we discuss all of these cases.
Rafe, what do you make of that positioning? I mean, it is hard to believe that a Prime Minister would have spoken in that way even just a few months ago, saying politicians must debate this, Andrew should testify. This is game-changing. Does this plunge the royal family into a constitutional crisis?
Yes, well, first of all, many of your viewers will probably hear Keir Starmer say that everyone should be treated equally. No one is above the law with incredulity, given the state of two-tier policing and two-tier justice in this country, where certain communities do seem to escape equal justice. But yes, this obviously does, we have never seen a prime minister involving themselves in royal affairs in this way or speaking so candidly about all of this. But of course, this has happened because the pathway has been greenlit by the king, who of course has made it very clear that he wants his brother to be treated as if he were a private citizen. And of course, once you have people like the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown calling for these investigations, once you have people like Hillary Clinton saying also that Andrew must come forward, it's quite simple. The old way of doing things, the never complain, never explain from the palace, number 10's reluctance to comment on royal affairs, that no longer applies for this situation because the British people and the Commonwealth realms simply won't stand up to any more attempt to divert attention away or simply to ignore the reality of what's faced here. And so it is a huge scandal. It has the potential to be a constitutional crisis, but I think enough is being done and enough leeway is being given for them to have a path out of this and for the public to actually, I would hope, understand that the royal family and the monarchy and now, of course, the government are fully behind full transparency over this.
Rafe Hadel Manku, royal historian, thank you so much. A recap of what is a historic day. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the royal formerly known as Prince, the royal formerly known as the Duke of York, has been arrested at Sandringham this morning over allegations of misconduct in public office. He is currently in police custody. The British royal family now plunged into a constitutional crisis of the sort that we haven't seen since the abdication 90 years ago. This is special breaking news coverage that you will not get from the mainstream media here on Outspoken. Let me now bring in political commentator Suzanne Evans and royal and political YouTube sensation Steph the Alternerd to join our coverage alongside our royal mastermind Angela Levin and P. Diner, who is joining us with all of the reaction stateside. Suzanne Evans, this is just the day that Charles never wanted. Do you see a way, given that we are told £1.5 million of the King's money was used as part of that hush-up payment to Virginia Giuffre, do you see a way that if Andrew does end up on trial, that Charles can stay king, given it's his court that Andrew will be tried in?
Well, look, Dan, I think it's a very important principle of British law, innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely.
I think we'd all do very well to remember that this morning. I think Andrew's obviously been arrested, and I think we'll have to let the police do their work and the Crown Prosecution Service do its work if appropriate, and see where we go. So perhaps it's rather premature to be talking about King Charles's head on a plate, if you like, because of something his brother's done. And in fact, I would argue very strongly that whatever his brother may have done, provided he wasn't an accessory to anything that his brother may or may not have done, then I think his position is secure. God help us all if we were blamed for the sins of our families.
No, and Suzanne, I totally agree with that as a principle. Absolutely. But I'm just thinking about the practical implications of this, because you'll remember the Paul Burrell court case when the late Queen Elizabeth II was going to be raised on the stand, and she had to come forward and effectively stop the trial by saying, I remember that conversation. Now, that puts Charles in the unenviable position where it is possible that Andrew would say, well, no, the now king knew about this. No, the now king knew about this payment. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's where it becomes constitutionally impossible for Charles. Because remember, for people outside of the United Kingdom who might not know, there is only one person in this country who cannot face justice, and it is King Charles, because it's his court.
Sure. Well, I think the other thing that has to be said, I mean, if Charles was involved in any payoff to Virginia Giuffre, then presumably he did it with Andrew protesting his innocence, as of course he is still doing. So again, it depends what he did or didn't know. And again, I think it is really very difficult to start speculating here, because we simply don't know. You're right, this is a huge constitutional crisis. Some people might say, you know, it's a good job the Queen isn't here, the late Queen isn't here to see this day, because of course we know Andrew was her favourite. And no doubt, as these allegations have come out day after day after day, she would have been absolutely devastated by them, as I think would the mother of any child who, when she found herself in this position. So I suppose in the grand scheme of the history of the royal family, there has always been scandal, scandals far worse than this in the annals of history. But this is certainly a momentous day, and I know when your producer phoned me this morning to give me the news, I hadn't heard it on the news. I heard it from a phone call from your producer. I was absolutely shocked. You know, we kind of knew this day would come, but my goodness,
it was still a breathtaking moment, wasn't it? It was a breathtaking moment, because you've got to think about the historical context of this, Steph, the Alter Nerd. For many years, British police have done everything possible to avoid even opening a formal investigation into Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. So there were multiple times where police forces assessed information, but there was never an investigation opened. So the fact that not only have they opened an investigation here, they have turned up at one of the King's properties on Andrew's 66th birthday and arrested him. At the very least, that means that they have a suspicion that a crime has been conducted. And of course, this crime is misconduct in public office, or the alleged crime, I should say, is misconduct in public office, which carries a potential life sentence. Steph, I mean, the jugular has been gone for here.
Yes, and we have to understand whose jugular they've got in the first place. Even though, you know, in an ideal world, we all turn around and we say that everyone's equal under the law, this, that, and the other. In reality, let's be real here, they're not. Otherwise, the likes of Mandelson would be arrested by now for misconduct in public office. The likes of Keir Starmer would be in cuffs as well. For them to now make this decision and implement the decision of arresting Andrew, formerly known as Prince, it means that their back is against the wall. There was nowhere else to turn, nothing else that they could have done to avoid it whatsoever. It had to be done. There was a smoking gun, and that was it. This, though, I believe, has been in the works, when I look back, hindsight, for the last couple of weeks, because you mentioned what Keir Starmer said this morning about how, yes, he believes that Andrew should be questioned, this, that, and the other. Thing is, though, it was a couple of weeks, end of January, where he also said that Andrew should testify before US Congress about his links to Epstein. So he's been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. I think that's a gateway. I think that's a gateway potentially to further charges, but also as well a potential extradition to the US so that they can get their hands on him and that he can testify before US Congress as well and be questioned by the FBI, because the FBI have been after him for the last couple of years anyway now.
P. Dinah, do you see that happening from an American perspective? I mean, all I would say is that I think Donald Trump, the US president, has so much respect for the British royal family, so much respect for King Charles. He will not want to make life more difficult. I mean, remember, that is why Trump has effectively said, look, we probably know that Harry broke the immigration entry rules to this country, but we're not going to pursue him because he doesn't want to make life difficult for King Charles. Do you really think Trump would have any part of a potential extradition of Andrew to the US, given he wants the Epstein files really to go away? He said we should just stop talking about this.
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen. I think right now this is a situation where they are showing us consequences. I don't think much will happen with Andrew coming here. I think this is a situation where they're just trying to give a way for Andrew to make account for some things that he has done. And like you said, this is the King's court. And then the king will find a way to say, okay, all is good, or there will be some conversation around what has happened. But I don't think there will be any consequences to it. I really don't. And I think it's just a way for the Americans to see that they are trying to do what they can, but not much is going to happen because it's a different system. And they're not going to allow this man to come to the States or make him come here. And I think if anything, it could be over, Zoom or something, but it's not going to be this real consequences for this man to have to account for it. I just don't see that happening. Um, I don't know. Sometimes I almost think that he knew this was going to happen. Andrew knew. I mean, there's no way that the king is over this court. His brother is arrested and he didn't know about it. I think it's a way to kind of say, okay, calm the waters a little bit. He's going to be arrested. Things are going to happen. He's going to be questioned about some things, and then something could happen. I mean, it's the king's court. So what more could happen that is going to be very severe for Andrew if his brother is over the courts? Like, I don't see that happening. And you can ask all you want here, but it doesn't mean it's going to actually happen or they have to force it to happen. I don't know. I just think it's a part of a plan, a bigger plan.
So today, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has been arrested on his 66th birthday. I want to bring you the full statement released from British police. They say, as part of the investigation, we have today, the 19th of February, arrested a man in his 60s from Norfolk on suspicion of misconduct in public office and are carrying out searches at addresses in Berkshire and Norfolk. The man remains in police custody at this time. We will not be naming the arrested man as per national guidance. Please also remember that this case is now active, so care should be taken with any publication to avoid being in contempt of court. Assistant Chief Constable Oliver Wright said, following a thorough assessment, we have now opened an investigation into this allegation of misconduct in public office. It is important that we protect the integrity and objectivity of our investigation as we work with our partners to investigate this alleged offence. We understand the significant public interest in this case, and we will provide updates at the appropriate time. Angela Levin, the royal family have been under pressure in recent weeks to comment on the release of the Epstein files. They will now be able to say, we can't say a word. There is a legal process that has to play out. Do you think that position can now hold, given it is likely that we're going to keep seeing Charles and William and Edward and other senior members of the royal family asked about these developments every time they're in public, in part, by the way, and I'm always very clear about this, by the Republic organisation, which is setting out to destroy the British royal family, to use this information to bring down the monarchy. But can silence from the royal family now hold?
No, I don't think so, actually, which is unusual for me. I just think that the pain of it and the embarrassment of it and the emotional side to it actually can affect the king very much anyway. I mean, he's worked all his life for the country and for trying to do good things. And the fact that this is now in front of him, I think it's too much for somebody in their late 70s anyway, frankly. And it will, I think it would be just too much for him. I feel incredibly sorry about this, but I think you can't go anywhere without having someone shouting, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? They're not going to know that you can't say it. So they're going to say, shout at any of the royal families. And whatever they were going to do is then ruined by this terrible monster. And it's just going to be very difficult for them all. And what I'm thinking of is where is Sarah, and what's going to happen to the two children, and are they going to have to scream and shout? Are they supposed to say something? Might they slip and say something? I mean, they're in trouble too. Beatrice and Eugenie are going to have a very hard time. I'm not saying that I feel incredibly sorry for them if they have been involved, but the fact for their their mother and their father and the king and queen and William and Catherine. I mean, to be part of this makes you feel you want to faint and be sick.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting what happens now with Fergie and Beatrice and Eugenie. Remember, the latter two remain princesses, which is a situation that William thinks is untenable. What I would say, and I think it is very important to point out, in everything that we have seen from the Epstein files, while Fergie and Eugenie and Beatrice are certainly reputationally damaged, there is no suggestion of criminality on their part. Now, I just want to bring you some footage. This is footage of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's arrest. It has been posted on X by the account Kiera Dis, and I don't believe we can actually see the former prince there, but what you can see is, of course, these historic pictures of a whole number of police in vehicles, plainclothes police turning up at Sandringham today. I mean, Suzanne Evans, from a PR point of view, what do you think the British royal family do here? Is it really sustainable to maintain silence, even though, given the UK has very stringent contempt of court laws, which make it difficult to talk about any sort of ongoing case, is something that they could probably hide behind? But is that going to be accepted? Is that going to be sustainable? It's like, don't we at times like this actually expect to hear from our king, expect to hear from our royal leaders?
I am sure they will put out some kind of statement. I have no doubt about that. But to be honest, Dan, yes, the PR is terrible, but what else can they do? You know, you cannot have a situation where the royal family is potentially in contempt of court, not least given that if there is a trial, if Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is charged, what will the trial papers say? They will say the king versus the king's brother. I mean, what an incredible state of affairs to be in. So there's very little they can say, actually. They really do have to keep mum, to use a colloquial term, because there's nothing else they can do. You know, we are all, Keir Starmer was talking earlier about how none of us are above the law. None of us are also above the contempt of court laws, and that includes the royal family. There's nothing else they can do except keep quiet. They have, I think, in terms of their public profile, done as much as they can already. They have stripped him of his title. They have ejected him from his royal residence. They have, I think, made it as clear as they can that they've washed their hands of him. What else can they do? There's nothing else they can say. And if I was advising them, I would be advising them to put out a statement of regret, and encouraging that the police will do their job and that there's nothing more to be said, and they won't be saying anything else, because to do so, I'm afraid, would land them in even deeper hot water.
We are bringing you the shocking developments of the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who remains in police custody on his 66th birthday after being arrested by police at Sandringham over misconduct in public office claims. Andrew Lowney, the royal author of Entitled, has made his first response to this arrest. Remember, his book really started the most recent downfall of Andrew. He says this is a defining moment in royal history, a historic day. And he says, I have been calling for this for over 6 months. Since Entitled, The Rise and Fall of the House of York was published, and I am hugely gratified that the police are finally taking Andrew's alleged crimes seriously. He goes on to say it's also highly significant that police have called for victims to come forward in regards to Andrew's alleged sexual crimes, and that 8 police forces now assessing claims across all of Mountbatten Windsor's alleged crimes is both encouraging and a sign of the breadth of evidence there is against him. Questions will have to be asked of what on earth prevented the police from taking action until now, and whether there has been a sustained royal cover-up. And staff such as Dominic Hampshire and Amanda Thirsk and his accountant Arthur Lancaster will need to be questioned thoroughly as to their role, if any, in Andrew's alleged crimes. Now, obviously, there's a lot to go at there, Steph, and I will say at this point, Dominic Hampshire, Amanda Thirsk, Arthur Lancaster have not released statements, and there is no suggestion, as far as I can see, that they have been involved in criminality. But what do you make of Andrew Lowney saying that it is very significant that the police have called for victims to come forward in regards to Andrew's alleged sexual crimes? That is a serious change in policy. And it really reminds me of other recent high-profile cases like Russell Brand, for example, where the police almost seemed to go on a witch hunt against a high-profile figure.
To me, this indicates that the police, and this is like my opinion, conspiracy theory, whatever, are under the impression that there is evidence to support the notion that there is a pattern of alleged criminality from Andrew towards these women, towards these girls. And in order to cement this pattern, in order to strengthen the potential case for the CPS, they need as many women as possible to come forward to testify against him. To me, the only reason why they would be calling for more, want a better phrase, witnesses and potential victims is to prove a pattern to all of this.
Suzanne Evans, what do you think of that? And also, what do you make of claims that potentially we're now going to also see Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie have to be interviewed by the police too?
Yeah,
not under caution, by the way, let me be clear.
Well, you know, if they were younger, social services would be involved as well. It is the most awful situation, and you really do feel for any child who's caught up in this kind of horror when they see their father dragged off by the police. I mean, it really doesn't bear thinking about. Really a horrendous situation to be in. And as Angela Levin was saying earlier, you know, you cannot but feel for his children and his former wife. It's a horrible situation to find yourself in. I was wondering too, actually, just thinking, you know, what implications are there here too for Peter Mandelson? So it seems as though Andrew's been arrested to do with allegations of his behaviour when he was the UK trade envoy. And of course, at the time, Peter Mandelson, who's also been linked to the Epstein files, was involved. So I don't know. Who are we going to see arrested next? Maybe it will be him.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting, I think, that the police have arrested Andrew before they've arrested Mandelson, yet they did conduct a search of Mandelson's home. For those outside the UK who may not know the role of Mandelson, he was the US ambassador for the United Kingdom until very recently, but is all over the Epstein files, was a government minister back in 2009, effectively the deputy prime minister, actually, when he was also forwarding seemingly sensitive state documents directly to Epstein. Now, Suzanne, we've got this poll running. 77% of our viewers still saying that King Charles should abdicate over this. I want to share with you a post on X from Kelvin McKenzie. Now, he is, of course, the most legendary editor in the past of the Sun newspaper, very much has his finger on the pulse of tabloid culture in the United Kingdom. And he thinks something very similar will play out, Suzanne. He has said in the past few moments, I suspect the royal family will face difficult Andrew-related questions in the months ahead about what they knew and when they knew it, leading to King Charles handing over the reins to William to give the nation a clean start. And the thing is, Suzanne, the one person in all of this who has his hands clean, who has been advocating for 7 years since the Newsnight interview for Andrew to be banished, is the heir to the throne, Prince William, the Prince of Wales.
Well, you know, I keep going back to what I said right at the very beginning when I joined your programme, Dan. It is innocent until proven guilty. I'm afraid a poll might very well say that 70% plus of people would like the king to resign, to abdicate. But really, it cannot be shown at this point that he has done anything wrong. And so his abdication, in my view, would be wrong. I think, we see trial by social media, don't we, day in, day out. And a lot of people have suffered grotesquely at the hands of that rampage that we see so very often now online. And a lot of people have been harmed by it, their lives utterly destroyed. And I think I go back to what I said before. We have to be very, very careful. Particularly, it's not Prince Charles who's been arrested. Now, the police may very well want to question him. They may not. We will just have to wait and see. But it can't be proved at this moment that anybody's done anything wrong. And so I really don't think we should be speculating about a man who is, arguably the highest rank in the land, having to give up that rank simply because he might be proven to be unfortunate enough to have a brother who's a bit of a wrong 'un. That doesn't seem fair to me. It seems completely contrary to British justice. And poll or no poll, the court of a public opinion is not going to be who decides this ultimately. If it comes to it, it's going to be a judge and a jury. And that's exactly how it should be, I'm afraid, not by the court of public opinion.
Yeah, and I want to come to all of my superstar panel on this, actually. I mean, Angela, you are going to see an increasing push by allies of William to say he should now take the throne. But that then risks the whole idea of a hereditary monarchy, does it not?
No, as I said before, what my feeling is that it might be too much for the king.
He is battling with cancer.
Well, yeah, not even just the cancer, but he's an emotional man. He works very hard for this country. He's done the best he can. And then to have this at the end of it is just too much to hold and too much to deal with. He might not have done anything bad, and of course that's what I think. But I do think to have this mighty burden is very difficult for someone any age, but especially when you're in your late 70s and he has been well, to manage and to say that, I just can't do any more, and I feel that I must leave you. And I think that's not saying it's his fault. He can't, as you said, can't pretend that his having a brother makes a big difference. They've never liked each other, and it's not that. It's just the fact that emotionally it's too much, and you can only hold it so much. I mean, Andrew has no emotion in him. And as you can see with all the women he's sort of taken in and thrown out.
Okay, Angela, I'm going to interrupt you. The king has just released a statement after the arrest of his brother. I want to bring this to you right now. This has just been issued. I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and suspicion of misconduct in public office. What now follows is the full, fair and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. In this, as I have said before, they have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course. As this process continues, it would not be right for me to comment further on this matter. Meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all. Charles R. So released in the past minute, a statement from King Charles III reacting to the arrest of his brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, making it very clear that he has no intention of abdicating, saying he will continue in duty and service to us all, saying that the police has the full and wholehearted support and cooperation. But as you pointed out, Suzanne Evans, also saying very clearly that the law must take its course here. Your reaction to the first words from King Charles?
Yeah, that, as I think I said earlier, that is exactly the sort of statement that I think the royal family should have put out, and exactly the sort of statement that I expected them to put out, with, as you say, that extra line at the end that they will continue in service to the nation. So yes, and that's going to be all we're going to hear from them from now on. So and this could potentially, of course, take a very long time. If there is an arrest, whether we've had the arrest, if there is a charge, if there is a trial, that's not going to happen quickly. And the royal family, unfortunately, is going to live with this shadow hanging over their heads potentially for a very, very long time. But I'm sure they will just do what they always do, put their heads down, get on with the day job. No doubt in private, they will be in deep despair and deeply troubled, but they will put on a brave face and a stiff upper lip, as the British royal family always does, and just get on with it. Got to admire them, really, but they've got a very, very difficult job to do. It is not going to be easy.
Dinah, your first response to the King's statement, who has said that what now follows is the full, fair and proper process required by law. Did he strike the right tone?
Yeah, I think that was a good thing for him to do. Certainly in the past, it's always been, we want to hear from our leaders. And I think the king putting this out and saying that is definitely a good move. It shows he's cooperating and he is going to let, the law play out, and let's see what happens. But, like I said, this is something that I'm sure he knew was going to happen, and they're allowing this to play out and to see what's going to happen, and just keep going, getting on and doing what they do, and not saying anything else about it. I mean, that was definitely a good move by the king. Yeah.
Steph, the Alter Nerd, your reaction to the first statement from King Charles?
It's interesting how he doesn't mention the specific names of the authorities and leaves it quite nebulous. Just the relevant authorities to now investigate and go through it. That to me indicates that, we're not just looking at, let's say, Thames Valley Police that's going to be in on this. One of the other reasons why I mention this is because just over a week ago, there was a palace spokesman that actually said that if they were approached by, and they said it here specifically, Thames Valley Police, that, quote, we stand ready to support them as you would expect. So just like, what I mentioned earlier on, Keir Starmer mentioned a couple of weeks ago, that yes, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has a case to answer, this, that and the other. Looks like, the royal family have known for at least a week or so that this was coming down the line, because they were already sowing the seeds publicly to turn around and say, yes, if Andrew is arrested, we will support the police as much as possible and we will cooperate as much as possible.
Another extraordinary development on a day of seismic breaking news. This from the BBC, reporting now that Andrew's former home in Windsor is being searched. So, Dinah, that would be Royal Lodge, where Andrew recently moved from to Sandringham.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to do a lot of different things at where he has been. I can imagine that he has taken great steps to get all of his belongings where he's at now, but still there could be some things there at Royal Lodge. I mean, for me personally, I just look at this as something that has to play out before the public so that they can see that the necessary steps are actually taking place, and perhaps there will be something found there. I don't know, but it just seems like they're going through the steps, doing things legally so that there's no questions about something that they may not have done that they should have done. They're definitely checking off all of the boxes and making things appear and play out as they should, as they would for any regular person that would be going through something like this. And I think that is a good sign. I think it looks like they're doing what they need to do. They're cooperating and making this, be, I guess, how it would normally play out for every other day people. I mean, I think the problem a lot of times is people seeing that those that are in higher positions of power get treated differently, and that's where a lot of the problems come for the common man. And to see that this is happening, I think settles things down a little bit so that there aren't all these big calls for, abdication and getting rid of, certain people, and just making this play out in a rightful way, I think calms the waters a lot for the people. And we have to just wait and see what happens. But for me personally, it just looks like they are doing what they need to do to make sure that this is played out in a way that makes everyone say, okay, there's going to be justice. But we still have to wait and see if there really is going to be justice at the end of the day.
Yes, indeed. Suzanne Evans, I know you're leaving us now, but thank you so much for all of your analysis. We're going to bring in Lauren the Insider in just one moment. But first, I want to get to this historic statement released by King Charles as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, his brother, has been arrested and his home, his former home, Royal Lodge, is now being searched by police, according to the BBC. This is the statement in full from King Charles, just repeating it for you. I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and suspicion of misconduct in public office. What now follows is the full, fair and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. In this, as I have said before, they have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course. As this process continues, it would not be right for me to comment further on this matter. Meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all. Charles R. So let me bring in Lauren the Insider alongside our superstar panel, Steph the Alter Nerd, P. Diner and Angela Levin. Lauren, your reaction to this huge news and the King's statement.
Well, obviously, with the King's statement, he is trying to be a bit more emotional in this statement and to connect with people, because there is a huge feeling that his reign so far by many is felt to have fallen short. So there's a lot of emotive language that he's using in this statement. We also know that two-tier policing, two-tier judiciary, it is a huge problem in the UK. That is a fact. So it's very interesting that King Charles has used this statement to reinforce that the law must, the process must happen. Regarding the arrest, this is a welcome sign, but we do have to remember bad apples like this do not thrive in alleged corruption solo. Anyone that thinks Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was operating and no one knew, they are wrong. That is categorically wrong, because there are so many whistleblowers, Dan, that have come out and they have been talking for years, and the mainstream media have smeared their name. They have made them out to be, or to have a vendetta. It's just simply not true. The palace gag everyone. So they didn't want this narrative coming out. We know the palace have silenced people before. So is this a welcome move? Yes. Do I think this is being played out to appease us? Yes, because at the end of the day, I think it is no coincidence that we are on the edge of civil unrest and civil war. We have so much going on in this country whereby people, normal everyday people, have been failed and continue to be failed. So much like Leveson, with this, I think they are cherry picking. They've got Mandelson, that's all played out in the press. They've got Andrew, now that's playing out in the press. But like I said, and I stated this on my channel over a week ago, I believe that the firm, the establishment, they're not overly happy that Andrew's been arrested, but much better that he goes down in the history books as being a bit of a fraud. And it is something about finances. But going down for a crime relating to all of the shocking allegations that have come out about abuse and trafficking and various really, really horrific allegations,
That is not what they want in the history books at all. And also, I've been working, Dan, on an investigation behind the scenes, and I have been warned, step away, don't go there. And this is from people within, let's just say, police forces. So that to me shows that there's still more truth. We haven't got to the full truth yet. We are a long way off. And this also makes me think, well, we all need to go back and listen to what Andrew Loney has said, because when Andrew Loney said he thinks Andrew would end up behind bars, my immediate reaction was he's blue blood. It's not going to happen. So he knows what more there is, because he knew a year ago that there was a very high possibility that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor would end up behind bars. But I do think the establishment would much rather he's behind bars for being fraudulent and a wheeler dealer as such. But at the end of the day, I want people to remember when Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was trade envoy, he was lobbying the House of Lords for convicted predator Jeffrey Epstein. You do not do that solo. There are so many staff, PR staff, lawyers, personal assistants, secretaries, Royal Police Protection officers. To say that no one knew about this, I can't take anyone seriously that says that, because it's categorically not true. And people were scared to talk out. You talk out, you never work in the industry again. If you go against the grain, see ya. And people have got mortgages to pay. People have got rent to pay. They were scared.
Thank you so much, Lauren. What I want to do now is just bring you the official statement, just so we can see it. This is obviously a historic statement from His Majesty the King. And what's very interesting to me there is, see that line, let me state clearly, the law must take its court. But this is a statement from His Majesty the King that he would never have wanted to release. I mean, it feels extraordinary that just a matter of months ago, he was allowing his brother Andrew Mountbatten Windsor to release his own statement from Buckingham Palace, suggesting that he would no longer continue to use his titles. And of course, at that point, he thought that there was a way out of this that wasn't going to lead to these types of investigations. Now, Lauren, you have obviously touched on a lot of the theories that people have around this arrest. And of course, you're not going to hear this in the mainstream media, why it's so important we cover it here, which is that there is suspicion that there has been a cover-up and that, of course, Andrew will actually not face the full force of the law. I want to bring you now a video from the social media influencer Andrew Tate, who has said that he believes Andrew's arrest as an ex-Prince Andrew's arrest is fake. Let's watch this together now.
Arrested, that's interesting, for his ties to Epstein, because Prince Andrew and Epstein were best buddies. And we've had evidence of this for years. Everyone's known it for years, but of course nothing was done. They just ignored the evidence for a very long time. But now they've taken action. They're going to arrest him and they're going to question him and release him on bail. Interesting. You know, when these same people who are on the Epstein list declared me a national security threat in 2022 and decided to try and destroy my influence by accusing me of sex trafficking, they didn't have the evidence that they have on Prince Andrew. They had no evidence against me. And not only was I arrested, I was put in jail for 4 months. All of my assets were seized. Every bank account, all of my cars, all of my watches, my gold, my crypto, everything was taken. I was slandered in the media endlessly and locked in my house for 4 years without trial before they eventually threw out the entire case because there was never any evidence in the first place. So I wonder, considering that Prince Andrew has far more evidence against him than has ever existed against me, will he be in jail for 4 months? Will he be locked in his house for 4 years? Will he lose access to all of his money and cars and wealth? No. You know what's going to happen? Guys, I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen. He's going to be arrested. He's going to be bailed. The news cycle's going to move on. So Prince Andrew just
Steph
got
the
arrested.
Alternate,
That's
what do
interesting.
you make of those comments there from Andrew Tate, who, again, seems to be suggesting that there is something performative in this? And, of course, if you're someone like him who has been subjected to lawfare over a long period of time, you can understand why there is, at the very least, a suspicion about whether Andrew really will face the full force of the law, even though that is what the king is saying as we come to air today.
Yeah, you can't blame people for thinking, to a certain extent that it is all performative, that there's not going to be any real consequences that Andrew should face should he be found guilty in a court of law of the charges that are going to be laid against him, this, that, and the other, because of literally who he is. He's the brother of the king. We're used to living in a world where the rich and powerful literally get away with everything. Even when they're backed in a corner, somehow they're able to wiggle themselves out of it. So I suppose there is this side eye to the whole situation of, okay, how is the establishment going to let Andrew wiggle his way out of this one, this, that, and the other, right? However, I would pose the scenario for consideration that they're not going to do that they may actually decide to throw the book at him, to treat him as the example where he's the one in jail and everyone focuses on him being allegedly, let's say, the monster working with Epstein, this, that, and the other, so that we forget the other alleged monsters in Epstein's circle, such as Mandelson. Why hasn't he been arrested? How about Bill Gates? Why hasn't he been questioned by the authorities? And many others, that, have been named in the Epstein emails as well, that, a lot of these emails are, on the face of it, pretty incriminating. All this focus on Andrew, where's the focus to the other people?
Very good point. Very good point. Now, I do just want to bring some reaction from Tom Sykes of the Royalist Substack, who has given his own version of these events, and he has described what has gone down, this arrest of Andrew at Sandringham, as a day of shame for the British royals. He said the sight of a fleet of police cars arriving at the home of the former Prince Andrew to arrest him on suspicion of committing misconduct in public office is a consummation for which his critics have devoutly wished for many years. That today is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's 66th birthday didn't bother the police as they drove into the 5-bedroom farmhouse of Wood Farm in the village of Wolverton, which lies within the Sandringham estate. It is an amazing turn of events, which few could have foreseen before the writer Andrew Lowney published his extraordinary biography of Prince Andrew and his former wife Sarah Ferguson in August last year, which lifted the lid on decades of unbelievably scurrilous and scandalous behaviour, as well as containing significant evidence of financial malfeasance and financial crime and financial wrongdoing. Lowney has always insisted that Andrew was more likely to ultimately face retribution for his financial rather than his sexual crimes. And it seems that is exactly what has happened, with police statements identifying misconduct in public office as the cause of the arrest. The Epstein files showed Andrew, who would have believed his emails would never be seen as they were exempt from freedom of information rules, openly passing confidential, market-moving government information to Epstein and his associates. In many ways, Andrew's fate was sealed 10 days ago, when King Charles III issued a statement saying that he supported and would cooperate with a police investigation into his brother. There remains, however, the question of whether Andrew might attempt what has become known as the Paul Burrell defence. In 2002, Paul Burrell, the former butler to Princess Diana, was accused of stealing thousands of her possessions. The trial collapsed after Queen Elizabeth II stated that Burrell had told her he was safeguarding the items. The constitutional implications of calling the monarch to give evidence effectively ended the case. Andrew could attempt a similar strategy. If he were to claim that his brother was aware of or had sanctioned his actions, it could complicate any prosecution. This may explain why palace sources have strongly denied reports that King Charles contributed $2 million towards the settlement with Virginia Giuffre. Approximately $14 million was reportedly paid to Giuffre after she alleged sexual abuse and trafficking by Andrew. If the king had contributed to that settlement, it would undermine any claim that he was unaware of the circumstances. Palace officials have maintained that Andrew misled the family as he misled others. That position becomes harder to sustain if senior members of the royal household approved a substantial settlement addressing such allegations. Responsibilities has at times been attributed to the late Queen Elizabeth II. However, when the settlement was reached in 2022, the Queen was seriously ill and died shortly afterwards. The suggestion that others were not centrally involved in the decision-making process is unlikely to persuade critics. The involvement of the National Crime Agency marks a further escalation. The NCA handles serious and organised crime, including large-scale trafficking and complex international investigations. It does not intervene in routine matters. Its participation alongside multiple police forces reviewing Department of Justice material related to Jeffrey Epstein signals that the investigation has moved into a coordinated national phase. So back to my superstar panel. P. Dinah, your reaction to Tom Sykes now openly suggesting that Andrew could try and use the Paul Burrell defence. I'd mentioned it earlier in our special live broadcast. That would put the king in an almost impossible position constitutionally.
Yes, but then what would the consequences then be for the king if he did come forth and say that he had some part of that? Like, it stops with him. So I think it would be a way to get Andrew out of this, and then nothing would actually happen. So that would be a good defense. But I look at this as other people, like to what Lauren was saying. Wouldn't there be other people in Andrew's circle that could take the fall for something like this? Only because I remember reading something where Andrew was, when he was in Thailand, and he was talking to, and, about the work that he was doing. He could not even stand up to talk about what he was doing. He had an assistant, someone else do it. He didn't do any of the work. He was just the person there as a figure, but other people were actually the movers of the work that he was doing. So I just see it as this could be consequential for other people, not Andrew, or perhaps the king will come in and take some accountability for it. And then what? You're not going to arrest the king. So I just don't see how this could implicate Andrew, or how he would be in some kind of trouble for what has happened. I think he will be scapegoated out of this. I don't see any consequences. Absolutely, this would be another situation like with the Queen and Burrow. So, I mean, that's just how I see it.
Yeah, it's interesting because Steph the Alter Nerd, there are now actual suggestions that the whole royal family could be under pressure as a result of this. Do you agree?
For me, of course, they're already under pressure. They're already under pressure for this. So many people have been publicly crying out for the king to take a stand, for the king to, release a statement, for the king to abdicate, right? So the royal family already is feeling the pressure. The public is already putting the pressure on them. The question is, okay, what are they going to do about it? How much are they really going to support the police and the authorities as they go through this investigation with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? Only time will tell at this point. We are so much at the beginning of all of this that, for me, I'm not going to judge the royal family until a little bit more time has passed and we see if they really do cooperate with the police moving forward at this point, now that it's all official and it's out there.
Steph the Alter Nerd, thank you so much. We will, of course, be tracking your coverage across the coming days. Really appreciate having you here. So if you're just tuning in, a historic day for the British royal family for all the wrong reasons. King Charles' future on the throne now under threat as his brother, the former Prince Andrew, arrested at Sandringham by police, his former home, Royal Lodge at Windsor, we believe, also being searched by police as a result of these claims of misconduct in public office, which were first revealed by the Jeffrey Epstein files. As we have been on air today, a historic statement has been released by King Charles III, who seems to be suggesting that there will certainly be no contemplation of an abdication. He has released this from Buckingham Palace. In the past hour, I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and suspicion of misconduct in public office. What now follows is the full, fair and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. In this, as I have said before, they have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course. As this process continues, it would not be right for me to comment further on this matter. Meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all. Charles R. Do stay with us for our special breaking coverage. We will be joined shortly by Tom Sykes of the Royalist Substack, and also Di Davies, the former Royal Protection Officer, who has absolutely been banging the drum about the fact that there has been a cover-up over this for some time. But what I want to do now is just show you how America is waking up to this news. This is how CNN has just broken into its programming. Let's just watch this together now.
If true, such an event would represent one of the most extraordinary developments in modern royal history. Because the individual at the centre of the controversy is not simply a member of the royal family. He is a prince whose name has already been tied to years of public debate, legal controversy, and institutional embarrassment. And now, according to the claims emerging online, the situation may have escalated to a level never before seen in the modern monarchy. Tonight, we examine the reports, the context behind them, and the potential consequences for the royal family. Because if the claims prove accurate, the implications could reshape public perception of the monarchy for years to come. To understand the impact of these claims, we must first revisit the long-running controversy surrounding Prince Andrew. For decades, Andrew held a prominent position within the royal family. He served in the Royal Navy. He represented the United Kingdom in diplomatic and business engagements, and he was widely known as the Duke of York. However, his public reputation changed dramatically after his association with convicted financier Jeffrey Epstein became widely known. The connection sparked global media attention and raised serious questions about Andrew's judgment and conduct. Although Andrew has consistently denied wrongdoing, the controversy caused lasting damage to his public image. Eventually, he stepped back from official royal duties. He relinquished military titles and royal patronages, and he withdrew almost entirely from public life. Even so, the shadow of the controversy has never completely disappeared. If reports of an arrest were confirmed, the event would be unprecedented in the modern era of the British monarchy. Historically, members of the royal family have rarely faced direct legal intervention in such a dramatic manner. The monarchy operates within a constitutional framework that emphasizes the rule of law, but public perception often assumes that royal figures remain insulated from ordinary legal processes. An arrest would challenge that perception directly. It would signal that even individuals born into royal privilege remain subject to legal accountability. And such a moment would inevitably trigger intense public debate about the future of the institution. One detail fueling the dramatic tone of the story is the timing. Reports suggest that the alleged arrest occurred on Prince Andrew's 66th birthday. Birthdays are typically occasions for celebration and reflection. But in this case, the date has reportedly become associated with a moment of crisis. Symbolically, the contrast could not be sharper. A personal milestone transforming into a public scandal. For the royal family, the optics alone would be devastating. Moments like this quickly become defining images in the public imagination. For King Charles III, any development involving Prince Andrew carries enormous implications. As both monarch and older brother, Charles faces a deeply complex situation. On one hand, The Crown must maintain the appearance of neutrality and respect for legal processes. On the other hand, the individuals involved are members of his own family. Balancing those two realities is one of the most difficult responsibilities of modern monarchy. The decisions made in moments like these can shape public perception for an entire reign.
Massive story. This is a massive story in the United States of America. How will Americans and the American MSM react to this?
I think that is exactly what they want to do. They want to keep the focus abroad. They want to talk about what is happening with those over in England because, like I said before, there have been, several people here in the States implicated in this Jeffrey Epstein in documents. And this is definitely welcome news, I think, by a lot of people, because that's what people here are saying, that no one here really in the States are being talked about. The evidence that has been shown has been about those over abroad. And so this is going to be, I think, a lot of coverage on Andrew. That's where the focus is going to be for a while, because they're certainly not trying to find any consequential problems with people here in the States. It's all about those abroad. And that's what I've heard a lot of Americans talking about. No one here really is finding any consequences to what has been discovered in those files.
Angela Levin, your reaction to how America is going to view this story?
Well, they'll think it's a very good story, and they do love the royal family, don't they? They're really keen, and they've got the king coming, and they've got William coming to go to America, and I wonder how they feel about that, and whether they don't actually start saying, well, just do tell us about this. You can tell us, we won't tell anyone else. Type of thing, and that's impossible. So I wonder if it will stay in the books. Very difficult. But they do love us and they do care about us, and that's very important, I think, in terms of the royal family.
Yes, we do, Angela. We do.
Lauren,
Pleased to hear it.
Lauren, the insider, do you see threats, though, to this state visit by King Charles to the US? Because, as Angela suggests, it's highly likely that the American press won't take the same type of positioning as our royal rota. They may well demand answers from the king.
Absolutely. I mean, this visit is hanging in the balance now, but everything we see will be performative. So the royal family like to compartmentalize things. So in their view, they've handed this over to the authorities, it's being dealt with, and as King Charles said in the statement, it's, onwards to serve you people. But I would also like to point out that it was only around 6 weeks ago that the Palace Press Office were removing parts of Paul Page, the former Royal Police Protection Officer's interviews. They were removing references that were not favourable towards Andrew. And these references, Dan, pertained to Andrew allegedly having ladies of the night brought in and out of Buckingham Palace. Ladies who were, I would say, young women. And these references were removed from interviews. There is only one media outlet that kept theirs up, and that's Wales Online. So the palace have still been working to protect Andrew in some capacity. King Charles, yes, he might go over to the US for this visit, but I'm also very apprehensive about having any form of trust with the palace, because only in December were we told the king's cancer treatment has gone well and it's now moving into the next stage of the treatment. And like anyone that is going through anything like that, I, of course, wish him a full and speedy recovery. But I do see some royal mouthpieces pushing certain agendas that the recent stress is affecting King Charles's health. And to me, I just see these narratives being played out now, so we can't challenge anything. Ultimately, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has behaved like this for decades, and King Charles knew, because it's impossible not to know. So yes, he might go on this state visit, but the American media, they will not be owned and dictated to like the Royal Rota, who just churn out approved propaganda. But we have seen the palace leverage their influence and power with ABC's Amy Robeck before, when they would not let the media outlet run the story they had on Andrew and Virginia Giuffre. So we've seen them dangle almost Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, as bartering power. So if you run that, you won't get access to the royals you almost want. So it also is worth noting that Prince William, he's got as far away from that toxicity within the palace. He's got a completely independent PR team, and he is not letting the House of Windsor burn down. He has been hugely pivotal in moving this to go in the right direction. This has not been King Charles driving this whatsoever. And I can tell you 100% that if anyone thinks King Charles has written that statement, they're going to be very disappointed. There will have been a team of lawyers and PRs writing that statement, because very rarely do we hear from the king. And this is a statement that will go down in history books. Remember as well, we only heard from King Charles initially regarding everything that was happening relating to all the allegations coming out with Andrew and Epstein, because he had to say something. But he said something after around 10 days post the files dropping. And again, I broke the story that this was because the palace had a team of lawyers working around the clock, forensically going through this to see what the evidence was. And then you write a statement around the evidence, because they don't want any statement they ever put out to implicate Andrew more. But this is a problem, because I'm afraid you don't get to leverage money, power, and influence for decades and get away with it. So there are going to be a lot of nervous people within the palace at the moment.
Okay, I'd love my superstar panel to stand by. Angela Levin, P. Diner, Lauren the Insider with us for this extraordinary day of breaking news. And now I want to bring in Tom Sykes of the Royalist Substack. Tom, we actually just read your incredible live report on this, which you describe as a day of shame for the British royals. What are you hearing, Tom? Charles has released this statement very clear. He has no intention to abdicate. I will continue in service and duty to you all. But our live poll, Tom, has 75% of our viewers saying, actually, this is going to be an abdication moment. Can Charles survive this?
So I think that, particularly in America and for American viewers, I think obviously the very clear comparison here is Watergate, right? Now, look, I am post-Watergate, so I only know it through the movies and through the films and through the accounts. But even, and for younger people, I'm sure it feels a bit remote. But basically what happened was that there was a fairly minor crime, which was that some operatives broke into an office and stole confidential information. But it turned out that Richard Nixon knew about it and did the cover-up, hence the birth of this crime, this phrase that the cover-up is worse than the crime. And I think that if this crisis does end in abdication, or the parallels with Watergate, which basically ended with Nixon being helicoptered out of the White House, would be completely unavoidable. And the fact is that this isn't actually about Andrew anymore. This is now about what the king knew and when he knew it. And that is the question that destroyed Nixon. And I think that your viewers are completely right. I think we are on a road that could definitely lead to abdication, that this could unseat the sovereign. And I have to say, I am rather proud of Britain today, in America, where these Epstein files have been released and no one, frankly, has faced anything remotely approaching a consequence. People are still in their jobs, still just carrying on blithely doing what they did. I'm very, very proud to say that shame is not dead in the United Kingdom. This is a day of shame for the United Kingdom, and we can see that the King is ashamed. And yes, of course, his statement will have been very carefully written by a team of lawyers and PR professionals. But it's I find the King's sudden conversion to the cause of open justice somewhat surprising, having covered up for Andrew for the past 20 years. But that said, the police did go and arrest Prince Andrew this morning, and I think that is something that we as British people can actually be bloody proud of, Dan. And I think that the King and the palace were not informed in advance. They've been very clear about that, and the King, I get the impression, has made it very clear that he does want justice to take its course, and the chips will now just have to fall where the chips fall. I suspect that if it does turn out that Charles was involved in the cover-up, that it will be his position will become very hard to retain. And we saw, of course, with King Juan Carlos of Spain, that when the scandal just got too bad, actually it is the kind of emergency parachute that the monarchy can pull. A monarchy can pull. It's okay, the King's gone, boom, that's it. But look, the reality is, Dan, he oversaw that payment of $14 million to Virginia Giuffre. He oversaw it. He bought her silence.
Well, this is the key. Well, it's going to become the key point, isn't it, Tom? Because I just want to bring up this front page of the Sun newspaper just a few days ago, last Thursday, February the 12th. Now, Tom, one of the things that we do is we like to take people behind the scenes about how it all works in terms of the media and the Royal Rota. And I was previously executive editor of The Sun. Victoria Newton, the editor of The Sun, is close to King Charles. Lots of private meetings. There has been a real effort, because when I was at The Sun, we actually had a Republican editor, a guy called Tony Gallagher, who's now the editor of The Times. Under Victoria Newton, there's been a real effort to make The Sun as pro-royal family, as pro-Charles, and as pro-William as possible. Now, she was the one who ran this story about the fact that there was this £12 million payoff. But the critical line within it, Tom, was that Charles had put forward £1.5 million of his own money. Now, Victoria Newton is not running that story unless she knows it's true. I really believe that. What we then saw happen was sort of like a very weak source bid by Buckingham Palace to leak to Kate Mansi of The Times, a sort of soft denial. But actually, if this was not true, Tom, and you've got Charles's reign under threat, they would be making complaints to Ipso, they would be threatening to sue. What's your understanding about whether Charles did actually put forward this £1.5 million, and could that be the payment that brings him down? Because not only can he not say that he wasn't aware of hush money being paid, it's his own money paying off Giuffre.
My understanding is that The Sun is completely standing by the story. Matt Wilkinson, very good royal reporter who wrote the story, has not changed a word of it. The Victoria Newton, as you say, impeccable sources within the palace. I think that the real point, though, right, is that there's been this kind of move of like protect the king, keep everybody around the king, and keep the king as far away from it as you can. So blame everything on Queen Elizabeth. But the reality is, whether this £1.5 million that Charles paid, whether it came from his personal bank account or it came from some sort of, inheritance from Prince Philip, or some roundabout way that there was some kind of not very plausible deniability that Charles had paid it. The reality is, right, that this settlement was made in February 2022. Okay, that's when the settlement was made. Now, I know somebody who spent a considerable amount of time with the Queen in the days before the coronation, before the Jubilee, which was in June or July, correct me if I'm wrong. So just a few months later. Now, they told me that at that time, before they went in to see her, remember the Queen's staff said, listen, I've got to warn you, she can't see very much. She can't hear very much. She's very easily confused. She doesn't spend a lot of time out of bed. So just go slowly and be really, really patient, and just be prepared that you may have to repeat stuff, because they didn't want them to be shocked, right? And this is fairly normal. When you go to meet the sovereign, you're given a bit of a briefing before of what to expect. This, however, is obviously very unusual, to be told that the sovereign is extremely, drifting in and out of reality, frankly. The idea that Charles, whether or not he personally signed a check for 1.5 million with his Coutts bank account, is frankly completely irrelevant. He oversaw the payment of $14 million. That's the point. This is the point of all of this. And I think that's why the Times hasn't, the palace hasn't really tried to fight this story in any meaningful way, because they know that fundamentally Charles oversaw that payment, and Charles did it partly because he didn't want the Queen's Jubilee overshadowed. But let's not forget, Dan, there was another very important announcement coming out just after that settlement was made. Queen Camilla, made by the Queen, that henceforth she hoped very much that Camilla would be known as the Queen Consort. And this, of course, in turn paved the way for her to become Queen Camilla. Now, those of us who are, unhealthily obsessed with this story will know that Camilla was never supposed to be queen. They went to a great deal of trouble to create this artificial title for her of Princess Consort, which never sat well with Charles. So the last thing he wanted, just as he was about to get his life stream of King Charles and Queen Camilla sitting on the throne, with their massive great crowns on and their big ermine robes, the last thing he wanted, I think, was for anything to come out about Prince Andrew. And he oversaw that payment. And you know what? Watergate began with a burglary. That's what it began with. And it ended up with this cover-up that proved so consequential, much more consequential than the original crime. And it's the use and abuse of executive power to shield yourself when you know the truth. That is the danger here for Charles. And I'm sorry, but if that is proven, and if that comes out, if this trial collapses because Andrew says, well, I told my brother all about it, and that the Paul Burrell defense comes into play, I don't see that. I think they're very lucky that they have this amazing kind of parachute, which is that they can say, okay, we're really, really sorry. Charles is going to abdicate and William's going to take over. There's even a lesser version where Charles kind of becomes king emeritus, and they say, okay, operational control. Charles is really ill. He's got really bad cancer. They're very fortunate in a way that they can use that as an excuse. But whatever happens, one way or the other, today, William needs to take control of the monarchy. Today.
And you were calling on that, Tom, even before the arrest, weren't you? You were saying that effectively this is the time for William to launch his modernisation project. And that has to mean a whole load of things, right? It has to mean Eugenie and Beatrice being stripped of their titles. It has to mean Harry and Meghan being stripped of their titles. It has to mean Archie and Lily no longer being in the line of succession. And it has to happen now. There is no longer this opportunity to wait.
Yeah, well, there's an old expression in, crisis management, isn't there, Dan? Never, and Lauren will know all about this. Never waste a good crisis, and there is the opportunity. There is this amazing opportunity now for William to come in, to take control, and to make to actually find some silver lining out of this whole disastrous situation, and do those things that so obviously need to be done. I mean, it's so obvious that Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie should not be swanning around the world trading on their HRH titles. I mean, it's just so unbelievably obvious. It's so unbelievably obvious that Princess Lilibet and Prince Archie should be normal citizens. They don't even live in this country. Their parents have denounced the royal family from which their titles come. I mean, it's absolutely absurd, and it is so obvious now. And if William does not take this opportunity, I think he will rue it for the rest of his days. This is the chance. This is the moment. It's an absolute horrific disaster what is happening at the moment. But let's have a shred of pride that we are actually finally making these powerful people accountable. That they, let's give Charles the credit of taking him at his word and saying that he does want open justice to be done, that he does want it to be conducted without fear or favor. Let's do him that favor. I think we all agree, even if we don't approve necessarily the way he's run the country, we all agree that he is a marvelous human being, a kind, humane man, who's just frankly completely out of his depth. He's just totally out of his depth. He's mismanaged this from day one. And, the chickens have come home to roost, quite frankly, Dan.
Yes, they have. A couple of pieces of breaking news, which I'll put to the whole panel now. Firstly, the Daily Mirror is reporting that the Prince and Princess of Wales fully support the King and his statement following the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor today. But it doesn't look like we are going to hear anything new directly from William and Catherine. Perhaps more significantly, we do now have the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, who has been investigating this, releasing a statement and revealing that he has actually submitted new additional information to the police. He has said, this is the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, I have submitted a 5-page memorandum to the Metropolitan, Surrey, Sussex, Thames Valley and other relevant UK police constabularies. This memorandum provides new and additional information to that which I submitted last week to the Met, Essex and Thames Valley police forces, where I expressed my concern that we secure justice for trafficked girls and women. So that is a highly significant new intervention. I think, Angela Levin, you wanted to come in?
I did. I was always under the impression that the money was too close to the Platinum Jubilee, and nobody wanted the Queen to be upset by this. So they didn't actually, she didn't give the money away, that someone else did. I don't know whether it was Charles or whoever, but that it wasn't actually done. It was done specifically because they wanted to have the Jubilee absolutely to be, full as it should be.
And we have seen new pictures of the Queen today. Here she is arriving for a public engagement in Westminster just hours after the arrest of Andrew. She was greeted by representatives of the Sinfonia Smith Square Concert Hall, where she will attend a lunchtime orchestral concert. Lauren Lunn-Farrow, I mean, Tom obviously talks about what's going to be going on from a PR perspective. The fact that you have a former Prime Minister submitting evidence to multiple police forces about the King's brother. I mean, this really is uncharted now.
Well, I'd imagine Gordon Brown might also be nervous as well. At the end of the day, we need to look deep into all of these institutions, because there are many, many more Andrew Mountbatten Windsors within the elite circles. And this, I'm sorry, this is performative, what we're seeing now, because Andrew Loney has raised case after case with the police. He has been blocked from Freedom of Information Acts. He has found that all of these institutions have been anything but transparent. They have not wanted to work with him to get the judiciary system working and doing the right thing. And that tells me all I need to know, because this isn't the first time someone's gone to the police about Andrew. So this is performative, but this is a PR crisis. They are now all trying to jump off a ship. You will see people throwing each other under the bus. And I've also noticed there's a lot of narratives coming out recently that I believe are trying to smear the late Queen's name. And that's very convenient, isn't it, for the palace to make sure that King Charles emerges as the one that's got clean hands and, oh, it was, you know, the late Queen. Whereas actually, like yourself and Tom have said, Dan, King Charles was working full on behind the scenes around the time of the Jubilee. But also, if we want to go one step further, looking at hypocrisy and double standards, the Queen's Jubilee had Naomi Campbell as an ambassador for it. This is a woman that's been arrested 4 times, I believe, for assault and found guilty by the law. We need to really start looking at who the royal family associate with, who they put on a pedestal as role models, because times have changed. And if we did not have X and YouTube, this would not have happened with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. They have not arrested him because they're doing the right thing. And the National Crime Agency, they're on their knees as well. So they're probably looking to rehabilitate their PR a bit and say, we're throwing the full force of the law book at Andrew. But Andrew has access to the best lawyers in the world. If we go back to the P. Diddy case, okay, he had 8 lawyers working around the clock on his case. We wouldn't be able to do that. That's millions and millions of pounds. So however the law deals with Andrew, make no mistake, it will be a lot nicer than if it were any of us, because we don't have access to lawyers that cost millions and millions of pounds. We just don't have that. So again, we're as the average person, none of us will experience the judiciary system like Andrew, even if they throw the rule book at him. Because let's remember, when Epstein was found guilty of soliciting a minor for prostitution, which makes him a paedophile, he was given a sweetheart deal because Alan Dershowitz did the sweetheart deal because Epstein had money, power, and influence. So I want all of Outspoken viewers to keep their eyes open, because what should have happened as well, Sarah Ferguson should be investigated. Money laundering, anyone? I mean, how much money has washed through her bank account? We've seen shocking allegations come out in the Epstein files and with Beatrice and Eugenie. So they're all going to claim they didn't know what was going on, but this is impossible and we're not stupid.
The Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, has now spoken out on this from the AI summit in India. What's interesting, of course, is he is also the Justice Secretary, and he has said, as Justice Secretary and as the Prime Minister has said, nobody in this country is above the law, and this is now a police investigation, and that must happen in the usual way. So again, this is unprecedented. You literally do not see senior politicians in this country speak out like that on royal issues, especially those serving in His Majesty's government. Piers Morgan has also just appeared on Fox News in the US, which is now also really waking up to this news and saying that he has never seen a bigger threat to the future of the monarchy than what is unfurling right now. Let's just listen to what Piers Morgan has had to say.
We now was that picture of him with Virginia Giuffre and Ghislaine Maxwell genuine, because Ghislaine Maxwell confirms that in leaked emails. But we also know that from Epstein, from a leaked email a few days ago, that he had sex with Virginia Giuffre, because Epstein reveals that in some correspondence. So all the statements that Andrew made in that interview have now been proven to be lies. And I think that he spun the same lies to his mother. But King Charles has seen that these were lies, realizes that Andrew was lying, realized the severity of this scandal and the potential danger to the monarchy itself. You know, Ainsley and I, we've done a lot of stuff together in the UK, of big royal events, from coronations to funerals in the last few years. And previously we will have all covered things like the death of Princess Diana. These are huge seismic moments in the royal family's history. I have never seen a bigger threat to the future of the monarchy than what is unfurling right now. We now
Tom Sykes, do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I mean, clearly, this is potentially bigger than the abdication crisis of 1936, because the abdication crisis of 1936 was, ultimately about this one rather weak man kind of saying that he was in love with this woman and being a bit, sort of ultimately being a bit childish and a bit sort of self-centered and, that kind of stuff. But there was never any suggestion that, Edward VIII, as Piers Morgan said there, was involved in a sex trafficking ring. I mean, it's unbelievable. But as I say, I think the real risk here to the monarchy is what happens if this trial collapses, because, if we end up at a trial, and I do think that we will, and I'm slightly would disagree with Lauren, and I would say that actually this is it's a movement, right? It's a movement. Of course, you can always say more should have happened earlier, but I am actually heartened by the fact that the police have moved on Andrew. And I don't know if you would have seen this in many other countries. And I think it should be, whilst being a moment of shame, it should also be a source of pride. I think that Andrew is finally being held to account. I completely agree that Sarah Ferguson must be held to account as well. The money laundering, the money washing through her accounts. Like, how do these people have their own specialized tax advisors at HMRC? It's outrageous. And the rumor is that Sarah's in the UAE, holed up and chatting to some of her former advisors who are also based out there. I don't think that Sarah will be in a rush to come back. And I think that Andrew, he's always been a bit behind the curve on this story, hasn't he? And if he could go back in time 2 years, I think he would probably do things very differently.
We now have a statement that has been released from Virginia Giuffre's family. She is, of course, the woman who has long alleged that she was sex trafficked by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The statement reads, "At last, today our broken hearts have been lifted at the news that no one is above the law, not even royalty. On behalf of our sister, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, we extend our gratitude to the UK's Thames Valley Police for their investigation and arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He was never a prince. For survivors everywhere, Virginia did this for you." Lauren, you have been very disturbed to see the way many of the accusers have been treated over the past decade. What do you make of this statement from the Giuffre family saying Andrew was never a prince?
Well, people that listened to Virginia knew that a long, long time ago. And the way that Virginia and all of the other brave victims and survivors have been treated is disgusting. And I will never stop calling people out for that, because this woman risked everything. She, I do not believe, took her own life. Not a chance. And this woman went up against the biggest groups of money, power, and influence in the world. And she was smeared. She was shamed. And I also want to just make a parallel point that Andrew Loney, when he was bringing his book out, he alleges that Sarah and Andrew had a billionaire Arab friend to engage in a smear campaign online for Andrew's book. And he suddenly ended up with lots of one-star reviews. I mean, we're talking about one of the best authors in the country, one of the top book agents. And he just wouldn't get bad reviews. So we see the elites leverage their positions against normal people. We need to look at a society and hold out these demons that shame and blame victims. Never should our first thought be to think someone's lying or to blame them. And so I am calling on everyone that if you see people that are ever trying to discredit brave people like Virginia Giuffre, it is those people that should be cancelled, not the victims, ever.
Tom Sykes, final word to you. What do you expect to happen next? Andrew's still in police custody. I mean, it's extraordinary to think he could right now be sitting in a cell with, toilet in one corner, sink in another. There are concerns about his mental health, about whether he could be at risk of suicide. Where do you see this going in the immediate hours ahead, Tom?
I think the thing that is so fascinating about this story is that the British monarchy has always kind of looked for its enemies in external places. It's always looked at the mob, at Parliament, at foreign powers, at guillotines, at hangmen. Do you know what I mean? All those stories of the monarchy. And in fact, it turns out that over and over and over again, the real danger is from within. It's from these disgusting, entitled, abusive people within abusing their own power. And that is where the crises keep arriving from, keep coming from. Whether it's Andrew or Edward VIII or Harry or George, Duke of Clarence, whoever you want to do, you can go back in time as far as you like. I find it very hard if the monarchy actually wants to survive now. I find it very hard to see a world in which a prosecution is not brought against Andrew, a proper, sensible prosecution. The only hope for the royal family is that they can make a deal with Andrew to plead guilty. That's basically it. If he pleads guilty, there's a chance that Charles can hang on. The chips may fall where the chips may fall. Andrew goes into jail. It'll be okay. He'll be looked after in jail. He'll be the celebrity prisoner, blah, blah, blah. Like if he pleads not guilty, if he contests this, if he fights this, and if he tries to call his brother, if it's unimaginable. And I think at that point, I think the king will have to go, sadly.
Absolutely extraordinary times. Tom Sykes will, of course, be keeping right across it on your brilliant royalist Substack. So appreciate the time today. I want to bring in now another man who has been well ahead of this story, the brilliant Di Davies. He is, of course, a former head of Royal Protection, former divisional commander in the Metropolitan Police. But in terms of this story, has been the man beating the drum, saying, there's a cover-up happening here. What are my former employers doing? Di Davies, so good to have you on Outspoken today on this extraordinary day of breaking news. First, I've just got to ask for your reaction. I mean, police showing up at Sandringham, Andrew's 66th birthday. They're apparently also searching Royal Lodge in Windsor. Did you ever think you would see this day?
Well, a very good afternoon to you. Lovely to be talking to you again. Yes, I've hoped for this day for some time, not necessarily because of the latest revelations, but because of what I felt was the failure to investigate Virginia's original allegations, not once, not twice, not three times, and then the fourth time when it was alleged that Andrew asked various people, Deputy Press Secretary, to find the dirt. And there clearly has been evidence of that, and yet the police yet again said nothing to see. How refreshing to see that it's a constabulary, Thames Valley, who have taken this bull by the horns. And I've said for a long time, this is a boil that requires lancing, and lancing deeply, not just for Andrew, but those who aided and abetted him, those who have conspired in a silence, who have known the truth. As some of your other participants here know, this has been swilling around in the palace within a variety of different sources, including government ministers, I allege. Who knew? How long have they known? And these are questions we should be asking in terms of this trade envoy. And then we can come on to the issue of alleged sexual trafficking. I am
so, Di, what you are suggesting is a full deep state cover-up here, and that could actually have serious consequences for people outside of Andrew and the British royal family too.
Yes, quite simply, yes. You don't give away £12 million allegedly if you are a family without properly getting somebody, a private detective, some of us, would have to use to look at all the case facts. You would have a proper examination. Now, we don't know what went on, but clearly somebody looked very carefully into this to actually pay money to a woman, as you've said many times, and other contributors, he didn't know, etc., etc. So I'm saying, as a trade envoy, let's go back to the trade envoy issue. People must have known. Ambassadors knew. Andrew Lowney's brilliant book suggested it, and actually evidences. And I go on evidence. I don't go because I don't like Andrew. I hardly know the man. I go on evidence. As an investigator with 55 years investigation, more than when I left the police worldwide, including taking on the Sultan of Brunei's brother-in-law, where he diddled my client out of 65 million. You know, I was accused then by them. They tried to do the dirty. People do the dirty on people like me. But I think if you're ethical and if you have a moral compass, it is incumbent on you, as one of your other presenters said, to stand up and tackle them. At my age, I'm not frightened of anybody now. I'll tell it as I see it. And if people like it, great. And if they don't, then answer my questions fully. Why don't you investigate properly? Because if you don't investigate, you won't find evidence. And the CPS can only charge on evidence. So if the police don't investigate, the CPS won't say, let's charge. Well, for once, let's see the police do their job properly.
Yeah, I know. They just haven't, though, have they? Which is the really concerning thing here. Di, what do you think in terms of the sex trafficking allegations? I mean, we have just learned that Gordon Brown, a former prime minister, has today submitted a 5-page memorandum to the Metropolitan Surrey, Sussex, Thames Valley and other relevant UK police constabularies. I mean, this is not the end of the troubles for Andrew, is it? Do you foresee a further arrest on these sex trafficking allegations?
If the evidence is there, properly investigated, then yes, surely it should follow. And naturally it should follow. And again, I come back to the victims. And I've been saying this since that infamous interview he did. I went on Newsnight and I said then, if there's credible evidence, 6 years ago, he should be investigated under caution. And there was credible evidence because in 2015, when Virginia came forward to give evidence to the Metropolitan Police, it's arguable there was credible evidence because at that time, all female victims in London should have been believed. I asked then and I ask now, who decided not to investigate it? Did they investigate the police officers? It's now proven that that picture was true. It's now true that they went to the Mews. He would have been accompanied by police officers. And again, the alibi of being in Woking at a pizza place, well, that was in the afternoon. These allegations took place in the evening. So I've never understood that was accepted. And what that interview has shown, and subsequent, is that he's a proven liar. He said he discontinued after the infamous pictures in New York. Well, my former officers were with him for 10 days. They stayed in what can only be described as a brothel with young ladies coming in and out. They were lewd pictures. They were paintings. You'd have to be blind, deaf and stupid as a police officer not to realize you were dealing with a sex offender. And after his conviction, didn't anybody question and look at the antecedents of those coming there? That's the normality. You check out people before to going to stay with them as far as the royal.
Yeah, and as someone who was in charge of those officers, can I just ask you how this would work technically? Are they required to give evidence in an investigation like this now, given what their role was? And would records still be kept from that time when the officers are alleged to have, for example, stayed with Andrew at Epstein's house in New York in 2011?
I don't know what records will be kept that far, I'll be frank with you, these days, because things change, don't they? In my day, they would be kept for a reasonable. Now, what anybody defined, I'll be frank with you, I don't know what records and pocketbooks. I personally didn't have anything to do with that because modestly at my level, that wasn't my concern. It should have been, perhaps with hindsight, but it wasn't. But in terms of what evidence, those officers, like any other individual, are duty bound to give evidence. If they saw and can now recall issues, they are and should be part of the investigation. No ifs and buts about it. And I would hope that if they had seen something, the problem is now they could be alleged to have been party if they knew something and they didn't know. So they would be.
Standing just behind King Charles in the line of succession is Prince William. As the future king, William represents the next chapter of the monarchy. Observers often describe him as a figure focused on modernization, accountability, and restoring public trust. If the Andrew controversy intensifies further, William may find himself playing an increasingly visible role in guiding the monarchy through the crisis. Public expectations for transparency and responsibility have never been higher, and younger royals are often expected to embody those values. Stories involving the royal family rarely remain confined to Britain. They quickly become global news events. Television networks, newspapers, and digital platforms across the world analyze every development in real time. In situations involving alleged legal action, that coverage becomes even more intense. Every detail is scrutinized, every statement examined, and every rumor debated. The result is a media storm that can reshape public narratives within hours. For centuries, the monarchy has relied on a delicate balance between tradition and public approval. Royal ceremonies, charitable initiatives, and national events help maintain that balance. But scandals can disrupt it quickly. If the Andrew controversy escalates further, the institution may face renewed calls for reform and greater transparency. Critics may argue that the monarchy must adapt more rapidly to modern expectations. Supporters may counter that the institution has already taken significant steps to distance itself from controversial figures. Either way, the debate is likely to intensify. Public attitudes toward the monarchy are not static. They evolve over time. Younger generations often view traditional institutions through a different lens than their predecessors. Issues such as accountability, equality before the law, and ethical leadership resonate strongly with modern audiences. If the Andrew story continues to dominate headlines, it could influence how those younger generations perceive the monarchy's relevance. And for any institution built on public support, that perception matters deeply. Even when controversies eventually fade, their impact can linger. Public memory tends to associate institutions with their most dramatic moments. For the royal family, managing reputational damage requires careful communication, consistent leadership, and time. The monarchy has survived many crises in the past. But each new controversy presents unique challenges shaped by the media environment of the moment. In today's digital age, stories spread faster than ever before, and controlling the narrative becomes far more difficult. At this stage, much remains uncertain. Reports circulating online must always be examined carefully and verified through reliable sources. Nevertheless, the very existence of such dramatic claims demonstrates how fragile the monarchy's public image can become during moments of controversy. For King Charles, Prince William, and other senior royals, the priority will likely be maintaining stability and public confidence. The coming weeks could prove crucial in determining how the story develops. Moments like this test the resilience of institutions. The British monarchy has endured for centuries precisely because it has adapted to changing circumstances. Each generation of royals must navigate its own unique challenges, and each crisis forces the institution to reassess how it communicates with the public it serves. Whether the Andrew story ultimately proves as dramatic as the headlines suggest or not, the broader lesson remains the same.
Treading carefully, and if I were them, I'd be taking my own legal advice.
And do they have a responsibility to report any law breaking that they see as a royal protection officer on duty?
100%. 100%. There's no equivocation about it. They're police officers first and foremost. Perhaps some of them have forgotten that because they've been there too long, some would say. But as far as I was concerned, I tell you, I brought in tenure. Sorry, that's my phone going. I brought in tenure to stop people being there too long because some had spent 20 years plus with their principals. I didn't think that was right. And I felt it was right that you brought in a fresh perspective, that you brought in street cops, which I pride myself I was, and you bring that savvy, not an educated, perhaps Oxford degree, but a street degree where you've learned your trade on the streets, and that's where good coppers learn how to be a good cop. And there are still some, and I hope whoever's dealing with it now falls into that category and not some academic who's there because he went to Oxford or she did.
So you would expect these Royal Protection Officers to have to tell the truth about what they saw. But the problem is, Di, from what I'm hearing, from what you're saying, is that if they were to admit that they were witness to any form of criminality, they could also be investigated.
Well, it follows if you aid and abet, counsel, or procure, and you fail, there not only is there a moral duty, there's a legal duty on a police officer. You 24/7, you as a police officer can't say, well, it's nothing to do with me. I was upstairs collecting fares, Your Worship. You have to report it, and if you didn't, you take the consequences. And there's a numerous stated cases where police officers have been prosecuted for their failure to act. So if indeed, and I say if, these are mere allegations, but it's not just the poor police officer, is it? It is trade secretaries, it's private secretaries. There's a whole caboodle of people who were with him for years traveling. And we're only dealing with the times when he was a trade envoy. There must be other times. So, where does it stop? Where does it stop, sadly? It is a Pandora's box. And unfortunately, today, that box has become a chasm, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's well and truly open now. But Di, just to clarify, for all of these years where the police kept refusing to open an investigation, they would say that they were assessing information and it would never go to a full investigation. It seems hard to believe that they were not operating a system of two-tier justice at that point.
Well, you might think that. I might think it. The only way we can find out if there's an independent investigation into them. Andrew Lowney has had the information, and he has far more than I ever have. I got involved because I lecture now on the history of attacks on the British royal family, going back to George III and European, because I always say if you don't learn the lessons of history, you can't translate them in today. So that's got my interest. I'm very happy. I lecture on cruise ships, which is hell, as you can imagine. But what I'm trying to say is I'm a historian and a historian with an investigator's background. So I investigate. And that's what got me involved in this. And that's why I was involved with Panorama. So as a former head of child protection too in my career, and I was an ambassador for Kidscape for 17 years, the children's program. I'm passionate about protecting women.
Totally.
And I'm passionate about protecting children. On both counts, if somebody like me can't speak up, who the hell else is there to do that? And that's why I'm speaking out.
And you have done incredible work on this. Di, just finally, can you just explain what will actually be happening with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor today? So he's in police custody at the moment. He now has his security paid for directly by Charles. Clearly, there are going to be concerns, I imagine, both from his private security and by the police about Andrew's own mental health. I mean, the last thing that we need is another Epstein here. I mean, I don't actually believe that Epstein took his own life, but let's just park that for one moment.
No, I don't either.
No.
For the record, I don't either.
No way. But the last thing we need is another death here before Andrew faces justice. So what is actually going to be happening? How will Andrew be protected in a way? And what will be going on at that police station right now?
Well, first and foremost, he will be read his rights. Once you get there, he will be told he doesn't have to say anything, etc., etc. And any comment he makes will be written down. He'll be treated like any other prisoner. He'll be searched and initially placed either in an interview room or a cell until the officers are ready to do a tape recorded interview, and it will be taped. I would imagine he would have the right to have a solicitor there, and I imagine if he was sensible, he would. And I suspect until he's had proper legal advice, knowing to some extent what the allegations now are in terms of what the Thames Valley are doing and anyone else, then he would stay quiet until he sought that advice. And once he has that, then they would restart an interview and question him again under tape, and he has the right to say no comment. And I suspect if he's sensible, unless he wants to plead guilty to anything, he would say no comment until I've taken legal advice, is what I would do.
Di Davies, you have done absolutely incredible work on this. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today on our special Outspoken broadcast. That is Di Davies, the former head of Royal Protection, who has really put his neck on the line, but been proven right in terms of saying this has been a cover-up. To our Royal Mastermind, Angela Levin now, who has been with us right from the start of this extraordinary day of breaking news. Angela, I think we just need to recap really what we know so far. So police arrived at Sandringham at Wood Farm at around 9:30 a.m. this morning, and within an hour we learned that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor had been arrested on his 66th birthday, not over these sex trafficking claims yet, but instead over allegations of misconduct in public office. Angela, while we have been on air, the King released a historic statement. Again, it's worth us just recapping what that statement said for people who are just tuning in. He said, I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and suspicion of misconduct in public office. What now follows is the full, fair and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. In this, as I have said before, they have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course. As this process continues, it would not be right for me to comment further on this matter. Meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all. Charles R. Angela, your reflection on what is a fast developing situation as Andrew remains in police custody at this hour.
Well, it's a very difficult position for him to be in, because I imagine that he doesn't know what to do, because he's always said, I can't remember, I don't know. And now he's actually sitting down and he's got to work out whether he says, I don't know anything about this, I'd rather wait, or whether he does say, I'm sorry, yes, this is what I've done. Can we get this over? I don't want to affect my family. But I think it'd be much more the fact about how he can stay okay. He just thinks he's above everybody. And that's been the problem, very sort of super. And, he'll just have to work that out. It's very hard for him, very hard for the royal family. When people have said that somebody else wrote for him, mostly he writes his own. They might write something for him and he scraps it out and writes it himself. He's told me that loads of times, as I think we just are open on that.
So you think these were words from King Charles's heart today, Angela?
I did, yes. I do think that it's very much him. He might have said, well, make it a bit, understand that I feel very upset about it. They might have done that, but he's always in charge of everything that's written. And often he just takes it away in the middle and says, no, this is not what I want. He's had a less of a good memory. So now he's actually, taken what other people have written for him. But on the whole, something like this, which is extremely important and extremely short, he actually does it himself.
Angela Levin, thank you for your brilliant reporting and analysis on this historic day. A reminder, of course, that we have been running this live poll throughout the show. Should King Charles abdicate? The final results are in. 75% of you say yes. 25% of you say no. Now, what I do suggest is that you subscribe right now to Dan Wootton Outspoken, because our breaking coverage of this historic day is going to continue. Lady Colin Campbell will be with us later in the day, and we will also be live as usual for a special edition of Dan Wootton Outspoken at 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. If you just hit the subscribe button on YouTube, turn on the notification bell, make sure you are then alerted to all of our live episodes. This is a fast developing story, a story that even as a monarchist and a royalist is impossible to deny plunges the British royal family into a crisis not seen for 90 years. Thank you so much for your company.